What's up, everybody? It is your boy Montoya Smith here with Politically Conscious, episode 68. I got my man Emil Bryant and Leo Smith in this thing. We are jumping in this thing hot, on fire, and without an intro. So we are the intro today. How about that? So with that said, I got my brother Emil Bryant in this thing with me, who's been on my long-time pundit. We've been doing this for over a year. We went live a couple of weeks ago. We've been highlighting that. We got Leo back last week. We had a fiery show. So this week I'll see if I can stay a little calm as we get through our dialogue, because we are the place where if you're tired of the propaganda, you listen to us. And so, Emil, if you will, go ahead and introduce yourself. We'll introduce Leo, and I'm going to start with some comments by LeBron James. I don't know if y'all saw them, so I'm going to actually play the cuts so we can lead into today's discussion. But with that said, tell them who you are, Emil.
Emil Bryant. I am an author and a political consultant. I write mostly because it's my heart, but when politicians need a different perspective, they come to me and I tell them the same thing. If you're going to work with me, you better tell the truth, tell it early and tell it often. Bad news does not get better with time. And the voter is the core reason why you are running. Therefore, give them the information with which they can make an informed and intelligent decision, because if you lie to them, they're going to find out.
Hey, good stuff. Leo, tell them who you are, and then I'm going to play this cut by LeBron. But thank you for being with us again, brother.
Hi, I'm Leo Smith. I'm a former Republican National Committee strategist and former GOP executive in Georgia, and founder and principal at Engage Futures Group, which is government relations and public affairs, where I do lobbying and mostly policy advocacy and sometimes a little bit of campaign consulting.
No, I love it. Y'all are the political experts. I am the moderator here. And so our goal for anybody watching is to try to give it to you straight, no chaser. We got Emil representing the left, if you will, Leo representing the right. I try to moderate from the middle as best as possible to give you our perspective on what's happening out here in politics, who always are just overwhelming you with propaganda. And so we try to weed through that. So I'm going to start with these comments by LeBron, and I'm going to follow up with a second cut from Gary Chambers. We've used his cuts on the show before and given his perspective. And I'm interested in, again, kind of what LeBron said, but more importantly, in my opinion, because again, this is politically conscious, Gary Chambers, who speaks on politics, his perspective and how y'all see what he had to say. So let me play both of these cuts back to back. I'll come off screen and play these cuts and get right back with y'all. All right, y'all. Make sure y'all are sharing this. If you see this, y'all want to see this show. So let me pull this up real quick and get this thing started. This is what LeBron had to say first.
Staying at the fucking Hyatt at 41 years old. You think I want to do that shit? Being in Memphis on a fucking random ass Thursday. I'm not like the first guy even talk about it in the NBA. Like, we all like, you guys have to move. Just go over to Nashville. You got Vanderbilt over there. You got the fucking NASCAR. You got a stadium. Don't they got a hockey team too?
Yeah, Predators.
Predators. Like, they got everything.
Doesn't look like LeBron's going to be on the Grizzlies anytime soon, so Grizzly fans out there.
Yeah, they know. Their only chance was in 2003 if they would have won the lottery to get me there. And I might have pulled a Eli Manning and not showed up.
Oh no, we lost Montoya. So I'll go first.
A lot's being said about this LeBron comment about Memphis and the NBA players making comments about Memphis. I'm from Baton Rouge, and much like Memphis, it's a majority black city that people have a lot to say about, but don't do a lot to help. In this dialogue, I think some of the things that are missing for me is, Memphis is a lot like a lot of other cities that are majority black, but I want to start by saying Memphis is the largest majority black city in America. It has, the president has sent the military into Memphis, and the governor of Tennessee consistently works against the city of Memphis. That is not an anomaly, though. That is something that happens in a lot of southern states. Atlanta is in Georgia. Georgia works against Atlanta all the time. New Orleans is in Louisiana. The state legislature right now in Louisiana is attempting to take away judicial seats from the city of New Orleans. White people in Baton Rouge split the city up and caused a $50 million deficit. And they're attempting right now to break up the school system in Baton Rouge. In Georgia, there is Atlanta, where just a few years ago, the white folks in Buckhead were attempting to split up the city. And as a result of them complaining or feeling certain ways about certain issues, they were able to leverage certain things, such as Cop City and other things, were the desires of people in Buckhead, not the people of Atlanta. Right now in Georgia, they are attempting to take away the partisan labels that exist for only 5 counties in Georgia. Now, Georgia has 60 something counties, but only 5 counties in the metro Atlanta. All 5 of those counties have black women as the district attorneys, but they want to change it to where on the ballot, it doesn't say what political party you're in, only for those 5 counties. When you look at Mississippi, Jackson is in Mississippi, the water system in Jackson, the political attacks that exist in Jackson from the state legislature, to try to take all of the resources from the city of Jackson, the federal attacks that, came on local elected officials in Jackson. You can look at Houston in Texas, where they took over the school system in Houston. What am I saying? In majority black cities, in states that have Republican control, we are facing a siege by these people. So it is not a benefit to black people who are fighting every day to try and make these cities better to hear a black person with influence, resources, and a microphone that reaches millions talk about taking something away from us in the same light that all of these white people are taking things from these black cities. And once you
Gary Chambers gives his perspective on what LeBron had to say. Definitely don't want to make this about whether LeBron should have a right to say it or not. I want to bring it obviously to the bigger context. And so, Lamil, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on either what LeBron had to say and some of what Gary Chambers had to say.
I hate that it came out because LeBron was just being casual, and I'm not saying he should have not been bagging on Memphis. Of course, he shouldn't have. But in a casual conversation like that, he's free to express his opinion. And what that did is it caught him saying something without any other context. So I won't defend him and say he shouldn't have said it, or he should have said it, or he should have said this, that, and the other. But the bottom line is somebody posted that and somebody broadcast that, and that's the bigger issue that I think the brother after him brought up. And that is that cities like Memphis and Jackson and Houston and Dallas and all these other places are facing this onslaught of turmoil that has just not stopped ever since Jim Crow. And what we would love to see is if LeBron was prompted and knew he was going to speak on behalf of himself to a nationwide audience, he may have had something different to say. We would have loved to have that been a casual conversation for him, but it was not. So what he said is valid. And yes, we wish LeBron would have said something much more poignant, but it was a casual conversation. And that's what you get during casual conversations. You get trash talk and flippant sort of side comments. And that's exactly what happened. So I don't feel bad for LeBron. He's a grown man. He can handle himself with his $1 billion fortune. But what hurts is that when given an opportunity to broadcast something better, they didn't. And that's because they were trying to there was an agenda attached to this clip, and we see it working its way through the media.
Leo, your thoughts about LeBron and some of what Gary Chambers had to say?
Well, unlike some people who want him to shut up and play basketball, I think that LeBron and every athlete, any person in America has a right to speak. And of course, they have to suffer the consequences of that speech as well. No matter where you are, no matter who you are, whether you're casual or you're officially in front of a press conference. I don't want to play golf with LeBron, who I know, if he's got friends who are that disloyal. When you're going out, I'm a golfer. When you go out to the golf course, you're talking crap. Just like when you show up at the basketball court, you're talking that's what it is. That's what he was doing. He had a golf club in his hand. He's talking crap. And some idiot who calls themselves a friend, because you play golf with your friends, unless it's just purely business. So you play golf with your closest buddy. Can you imagine Tiger Woods, Charles Barkley, and Michael Jordan? If Tiger or anyone, now Tiger's got a lot of issues, but he did not squeal on his buddies, because I'm telling you, they talk some stuff when they're on the course. So LeBron's probably going to be quite upset with that, whoever that was, whoever that idiot was that shared that like that. Somebody trying to get a come up, probably. However, I think this won't impact LeBron at all. Not at all. I know that there's a lot of folks who are interested in canceling any black person who doesn't, toe the line like that gentleman right there. But the fact is that Memphis does have problems. Ask Jasmine Clark. She went to school in Memphis, right? She went to Rhodes College right there in Memphis, along with Amy Coleman Barrett. Went to Rhodes College right there. Beautiful campus, beautiful school, amazing school. 7 minutes out of the city of Memphis. Last time I was there, I was visiting with my son as a college visit. And yes, the National Guard was there on Bill Street, but I had the most amazing time. So I'm going to give some props to Memphis. It is a traditional old city. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was thriving, had a great blues scene, but it's got city problems, right? It's a small city without much economy. Good thing FedEx is there providing some economy. So let's talk about that. If we're concerned about, helping a majority black city, I think that's appropriate to be concerned about that. But actually, I don't know what the gentleman was kind of alluding to, but the National Guard being there was the reason why I had such an amazing time. And I'm looking forward to visiting Memphis again. And I hope they have the same police present, because it does have a problem. But people like me who want to go spend money there, I guess LeBron is saying, he's kind of saying, well, actually, no, he's taking the bad route, because what he's saying is, instead of seeing how him playing there and bringing that NBA money there helps the city, he's going, I'd rather go somewhere else. And, but I'm not going to, I think if you sat down with LeBron and you had a serious conversation about investing in the city, he would say, I was joking around, and he would have a different opinion, because he's from Cleveland. Right. And Cleveland and Memphis ain't a whole lot different.
Right. I put behind me these placards from Dr. King. Memphis was pivotal in the civil rights movement. Dr. King was killed there. But more importantly, what we have to remember is that as the epicenter of so much civil rights activity, Memphis was an important player in how we are shaping the thought of civil rights, because so many things happen there. So you can't just put it in a vacuum and say it's bad or it's good. You have to look at it in its totality. Elon Musk built Colossus, the biggest AI center in the world there. And at the same time, he's polluting the atmosphere because he used diesel generators to do it. So there's a lot happening.
Yeah, let me steal your thunder. Let me play one more cut from Gary. Let me steal your thunder a little bit, because I got one more cut from Gary Chambers to kind of go deeper into this. I want to now move into the politics, because like you said, I wanted to highlight LeBron got called out by Stephen A. and a bunch of others in the community. I'm not a big fan of expecting quote unquote millionaires to cover areas that are not theirs. But Gary Chambers still kind of brings it up, so it's something to speak to. But he gets into some of what you're talking about, Emil. Leo, I would offer that, having been to Memphis a few times myself, my roommate from college was there. There's just a side. You don't need the National Guard to go to the side of Memphis where there's no problem. I'm promise you don't. I've been on both sides. I've been scared on the bad side and enjoyed the hell out of myself without the National Guard on the side that people don't worry about. I don't think the National Guard helped you in that regard. That's my personal opinion. But let me go ahead with another cut from Gary Chambers.
Folks with the millions of dollars are not willing to invest in hotels in those black cities to improve. What are we talking about? To talk about moving an asset out of a black community rather than coming with your millionaire self to build more assets in these black communities, where often it is cheaper to build in some of these cities where you are going to get that same wealth that a lot of these white business owners are getting in these cities. But we don't have the leverage with black people able to leverage the conversation up to the people at the governor's mansion, because we focus on mayor's races, not on statewide elections. As a people, we focus on mayor's races, not statewide elections. And so we only have one black governor in the whole country. That's Maryland. And if you process the improvements that you're seeing in Baltimore, Look at the fact that you've got a black governor, a Democratic legislature, and a black mayor. Wow, progress is happening. Wow, the lowest homicides in 50 years. Wow, economic development is happening. I'll be damned. It's not that complicated. But nobody's talking about Bill Lee in Tennessee. Nobody's talking about Brian Kemp in Georgia. Nobody's talking about Greg Abbott in Texas. Nobody's talking about Jeff Landry here in Louisiana. But there are black people that are wealthy talking about what should be moved out of black communities because you don't feel like you can get a comfortable stay in a hotel for the night, buddy. I do think that that's a bit elitist and detached from the reality of what we are facing. And if you can't talk about taking that damn data center up out them communities in Memphis, how you going to talk about taking away something that actually the people of Memphis enjoy? Now, there are things that the people of Memphis are asking to take up out their city, but the state of Tennessee is sending it straight in there with Elon. So process that through the lens of black people who live in black communities, who support these black people, who want these black people not to echo the same type of narratives that harm the progress of black communities.
So, Leo, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on what Gary Chambers had to say. Again, I'll highlight, I'm not big in investing and saying, hey, a millionaire should care about an area that's not his. That's, again, I'll stand on that comment. But what are your thoughts about what else he had to say? Because as Emil was bringing up the data center type stuff, we're not surprised that that our communities will be the ones that have to fight off that type of stuff because that's been the norm with big industry for years. So just kind of my thoughts on that. But go ahead, Leo.
Just a couple of things and a few clarifications. Again, I want to point out that I don't think that LeBron James was speaking rationally at all. And like you, Montoya, I think that especially in the black community, we depend too much on athletes and entertainers, which are one and the same, to professionally, to share thought leadership on economics and politics when they're like wholly, mostly unqualified. And unfortunately, because we don't have a lot of intellectual leaders and black think tanks, et cetera, urban think tanks that can rise up and show thought leadership, that's the situation we're in. And we need to think about how to change that. So moving on, and I mentioned that Memphis has a great university. There are other good universities there. And so we have to figure out, LeBron, and I'm actually going to send a note to somebody. There's a lot that LeBron has done as an investment. I mean, I had a program, Southern Kings basketball, LeBron James shooting stars. We sent over 100 kids to college, 50 of them full rides. LeBron James.
He created his school in Cleveland.
He's created public charter schools. The guy he has an investment mentality. I think he was purely talking crap. Because here's the other thing. When he says that he didn't have a nice hotel, I didn't hear the whole video clip. I didn't hear him dissing the hotel. I think what he's saying is that there are other cities that are more enjoyable to visit. That's what he's saying. Maybe he doesn't like blues. I love blues. But the Peabody Hotel there is one of the grandest hotels I've ever stayed in. It is immaculate, beautiful, wonderful, regal. So if he's staying at the Peabody, I don't know what he's complaining about. That's an amazing hotel. So I think it's poor crap, and I'm sorry that Mr. Chambers has now been triggered by that so much. But Mr. Chambers is triggered for real reasons, okay? Again, the data center in Memphis, just for clarification so people understand politics, is not ordered by the state. Data centers are locally approved. Okay, so that means that the people in Memphis needed that money and they were okay getting that because they need money. It's a super poor town. Okay, so that's what, and people just like Keisha Lance Bottoms agreed to a data center. Mayor Reeves, they don't like it now. They don't like the data center being in Southwest Atlanta. But they agreed to Microsoft data center. Now, our current mayor in Atlanta is saying, I don't want any more data centers. But they did it for the money. So when you find yourself compromised financially because you don't have a strong enough tax base, right? Then that's what's going to happen. You have to make deals with the devil. And so what we need to do in black cities or any city, but especially black cities that have a low tax base, is figure out how to improve our tax base. And you do that by improving your schools. Okay, bringing in and creating an ecosystem where you create an investment modality for major corporations to come in who are good corporations, who are good civic participants, you do that and you decrease crime. And when you do that, you can create an investment economy in your community that isn't one that has to be forced into deals with the devil. And I hope Black Mayors Association will start, and I believe they will start to look at accountability for the environment they're creating.
So yeah, it sounds like in just what you just said, it sounds like, at least based on what you just mentioned, with Mayor Dickens saying, hey, he's refusing another one or whatever, it sounds like he's he's attempting to do what you just said. If I could just kind of bring that, kind of to full circle.
Props to Mayor Dickens because he stood his ground on that. I think, data centers are inevitable, but I think you do have to figure out whether they're right for your community. And there is an issue as to whether or not the state, as some of you have, just full disclosure, I was a lobbyist mitigating data centers this past session, and we did a pretty good job of that. But, and that's why I have expertise on data centers from the West Coast to East Coast. I've been an expert on that issue. So it is a great thing. I mean, obviously you can't even use AI if you don't have data centers. Eventually they will probably be in space or in the ocean. I said that here on your show so that people can know where it's going to go. But the fact is that we have to have them. They are good for learning and for productivity and for economy. And so now the question is, what communities are right for them and what conditions do you want them when they come?
And shameless plug for our community, make STEM to include building data centers in space and in the ocean, make that our new NFL and new NBA.
Boom.
Like, we don't have enough Americans to fill the jobs. So if our community focuses on sending our kids to get that knowledge, we will fill those high-paying jobs out of necessity. That's just a little shout out for me to, aside from politics, to think about the economics. Let's take advantage of what, as Leo just said, what's inevitable. Go ahead, Emil, your thoughts on what Gary Chambers had to say.
Yeah, I appreciate Gary Chambers' perspective. I just hate that it was prompted by an offhand comment from LeBron James, because what he's raising is absolutely the right thing, the right frame, and the right perspective, in my opinion. If we go back to the data centers real quick, one of the problems with the Memphis data center conversation colossus is what it's called by Elon Musk and XAI, is not that they brought it in, but where did they put it? What part of the city did they put it in? They've got unpermitted methane gas turbines in what part of the city? The part of the city that is least likely to have representation and people like Leo lobbying on their behalf. So they're unpermitted, polluting, and they're hurting the people who are already hurting the most more. So yeah, there is a place and a way to have data centers, and you have to make them work. Now, to the city council's credit, and this is very important because we need to be looking at this across the country like Leo's talking about. They said, you're going to use a lot of water. We want you to build augment the wastewater treatment plant so you can get more of your water through that process than just getting from our aquifer and from our potable water supply. Every data center around the country needs to start thinking, and every community needs to start thinking about data centers like that, like these self-contained ways. And what usually happens, though, is that the data center owners and operators prey on the civic leaders and the cities and localities that have the least likely jobs, the least amount of, and the greatest need for tax revenue. And then they come in and they do really environmentally awful things along the way. So these are things that I think need to be addressed. So prompted by the wrong thing, which is LeBron's offhand comment, Gary Chambers is elevating a lot of really important issues. And here's the forefront of the thing. In my opinion, we need to stay focused on what matters. Prompted by LeBron or not, we need to be elevating these issues over and over again. Leo thinks that these data centers that go into space or underwater. I'm more likely to agree with the underwater portion of that versus the space, because I think that bandwidth issue is going to be the big problem in space. But the other problem that you have with data centers is energy consumption. And somebody's got to figure out how to either reduce the amount of energy or increase the efficiency of those data centers. And that's important because of what you said, Montoya. We're going to need men and women who think along those lines And the only people that I know who really understand scarcity and know how to solve it are people who come from scarcity and elevate through the education system. And that's one of the things that I think we can bring to the table, are people who come from diverse backgrounds and really start addressing some of these high-tech problems from a multiplicity of perspectives.
All right, cool. I want to let Leo give his call to action. Let me say this real quick before you do so, Leo. And I just want to highlight your famous quote. If you don't get into politics, politics will get into you. And so I'm saying that, again, we're trying to raise the consciousness of our community's political acumen, if you will. That's what we attempt to do on this show more than anything. And so I say that to say, again, that's Leo's famous quote. If you don't get into politics, politics will get into you. And so saying, hey, the data centers are just coming to our communities and we don't want them, is the reason you can say that is if you are not involved in the politics to ensure whether you ensure where it's at, how it's done. You have to be involved and select the type of leaders that are going to play it smart, like the example Leo just gave. Mayor Dickens played it smart in this recent situation. But at the same time, if you're desperate for jobs, and again, we know this is the reality of a lot of, if you will, black cities per se, but at the same time, if you're just sit back taking it, you're taking it if you're saying politics don't matter. Well, this is how it matters. And all you're doing is left to complain at the results if you were not involved in the political process. Politics will get into you. Go ahead, Leo.
You know, this is not a black issue, a white issue, but it's an issue of, again, as Du Bois talked about the talented 10th, there's also a talented 10th in the white community as well. And here's one of the things that I was reading the Jefferson papers at University of Virginia a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting reading some of the archives in a special collection. And it dawned on me how this small group of intellectual farmers, right? Farmers, intellectuals, and some traders and exporters from other countries. Jefferson was highly connected with intellectual leaders in Italy and France. We all know about all the French coming over to Williamsburg and hanging out in Virginia. And so in other words, they cared about a shared economy with each other that was global, even back in those, the early formation of America. So when I'm challenging black people, including myself, here's the call to action. It is not unusual for people to understand that being adjacent to another culture, community, or whatever also increases opportunity for you. So me as a black person who's attracted to Atlanta in the way that many black, more well-to-do than the average black person is in Atlanta, LeBron being the same one. So what we have to do is decide to make our own investments in Memphis, okay? In the same way that Dr. King went to Memphis, he went to Chicago, he went other places so that he could help improve their lot. So you, me, wherever we are living, anybody listening to this show, let's be inspired by what Chambers did based on what LeBron said and what Chambers is showing concern. I would love to call up Mr. Chambers and say, let's go do an event in Memphis that talks about not shaming them, but how can we help Larry Miller, the representative in Memphis. Let's contact Larry Miller. That's the call to action. Contact Larry Miller, District 38, I think it is, Memphis, and say, how can we help? That's the single comment. And he may say, come to Memphis and see for yourself. Just don't go to the neighborhoods why are you even going to those neighborhoods? Like you said, Montoya, when I go to the Peabody, I walk to Bill Street, I have a fabulous time. And so the food is great. The music is great. Let's take a trip to Memphis.
Representative Steve Cohen represents most of Memphis, 9th District.
There we go. I'm calling them today.
Sounds good. We might be reporting back on this call to action. I love it. Hey, Leo, we got a situation where Kenny 77, he's usually disagreeing with you. He actually agrees with you today from an earlier comment. He says, Leo is right. Like I said previously, we need to invest in education, low taxes because of high poverty and high crime, because of low education and low employment and low pay. Good stuff. I got a couple of other ones. Another one from Kenny says, this is also a national issue and going after anybody that is lower income. Kentucky family reject 26 million bid to sell farmland for data center. So that's something that must have happened. I know Kenny's originally from Kentucky. Let's see here. I think let's see if I see anything else. Political figures of Memphis and Tennessee are a problem, according to, looks like Chris. All right, so yeah, keep the comments coming. Let's go to another big issue that just happened this week with the president, if you will. So I'm going to actually just put up this picture. I used it as the thumbnail for the show, as I didn't get to promote as well. But let me just put up this picture real quick and get you guys comment. Well, actually, I'm going to read some comments about this picture that made the news this week with President Trump and his True Social, if you will. So I'm going to put up this picture, and I'm going to share some comments and then get you guys to react. So let me put the picture up first. Cool. All of y'all, everybody's seen this picture, and he originally had it up, and then after some backlash, President Trump decided to take it down. But I'll leave it up as I read these comments that I found on the internet. It says, these are some comments, again, just to give perspectives. It says, instead of attacking President Trump, how about trying to be grateful for him? All of you know full well Trump doesn't truly see himself as a savior or healer. It's quite shocking how easily that image rattled some of you and prompted a need to call him out for his blasphemous ways. Few presidents in the history of mankind have done more for the advancement of the Judeo-Christian faith than President Donald Trump. Number one, I'm going to read all of them. I'm going to read a few of these. Number one, appointed 3 Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe versus Wade, delivering a major pro-life victory. Number 2, established the White House Faith Office in the West Wing to prioritize faith-based initiatives and religious liberty. Number 3, created the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias to combat federal discrimination against Christians. Number 4, launched the Religious Liberty Commission to protect and promote Christian expression nationwide. Number 5, pardoned pro-life activists and Christians targeted for peaceful prayer and faith-based actions. Last one I'll read. Number 6, moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, honoring biblical ties and evangelical priorities. It says, it said the list goes on. Have you praised God for that, or are we busy savoring for every opportunity to shout how unlike Christ he is? Imagine how more orderly the world would be if we all scrutinized and corrected ourselves as harshly as we do the president. God have mercy on us. Grace for America. Amen. A whole lot of you need to immediately repent and ask God to forgive you for your horrendous behavior over the past 24 hours and start doing better. Instead of attacking Trump, Christians should be praising God for the blessings of having him as our president. And this is by someone by the name of Jake Hilton wrote that. So Emil, we'll start with you. I thought it was, again, for what we do on this show, I thought it was an imperative that we give a different perspective than the easy response to this picture that President Trump eventually relatively quickly took down. Let me take the picture down myself, and then I'll let you go, Emil. Go ahead, brother.
Back when I was a Christian, this would have offended me, and it's not because he depicts himself as Jesus. It's because so many people accept him as this otherworldly savior figure. And I'm like, my Bible history runs through the Old Testament and the New Testament pretty thoroughly. And one of the things I always laugh at is the children of Israel asked for a king, and God told them, hey, I am your king. They said, no, we want a king we can see. And so he gave them Saul. And if you know anything about the King Saul, you know that was not a good thing for the people, children of Israel. And that's kind of the way that I see this now. You asked for it, you got it, and now it's not necessarily everything you thought it would be. But hey, it's a visible symbol of what you said you wanted. And what I would offer to our listeners and our viewers is perhaps this is yet another misdirection and a marketing ploy. That this was not put up to aggrandize the man, but rather it was to distract you from something else. And it worked brilliantly as a distraction. It took the heat off of something very, very important for 24 hours. And that was that the Iran negotiations weren't working very well, that there's a lot of stuff happening around the world that isn't going according to whatever plan that we don't know as the American people was supposed to go down. And a lot of that pressure was relieved for one news cycle by putting up this stupid picture. By the way, the picture was made by a pastor named Nick Adams, who himself did about 2 months ago. So President Trump just retweeted this and set off a firestorm. It's funny that a pastor posted it in the first place, but the fact is that it was designed as a distraction and it worked brilliantly, and that's the propaganda.
Go ahead, Leo. You can go ahead. Brad said,
No, I don't. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that Emil says, and it's so wonderful that Emil he understands Trump and how Trump works, because that is an element of what Trump does. However, it's not the first time that Trump has been positioned, or any. There have been several presidents, even Obama. There were fans of Obama. So you're pointing out, Emil, that it was a fan of Trump that did that, right? And Trump, just with his narcissistic personality, which is required to run for president anyway, so he posted. The difference is when Obama had something like, if he had a state representative say that Obama's like the second coming, or somebody say the president is like our daddy, if those things are said, Obama didn't go and repost it. So if you put Obama, holding like Moses walking, which those images were created by progressives and Democrats. They did do that kind of stuff. Newsweek had articles and covers with Obama looking like he was deity. However, Obama didn't repost that stuff because that wasn't, diverting attention wasn't part of his strategy. Trump is an entertainer. He entertains. His base wanted what that gentleman gave a call about. That gentleman is the quintessential new Trump voter. And when I say that, new voter, I guarantee you that guy probably wasn't a regular voter before Trump. He's a religious voter. Because he speaks as though I'm a Christian, used to be an AME minister. However, that guy speaks as though we are a Christian nation. Mm-hmm. Our founders do not agree with you, sir. Christian founders don't agree with you. I just mentioned reading Thomas Jefferson's original papers. And sir, I would encourage you to go get educated because you are just doing something that's emotional, that's very sheepy when you do not hold a leader accountable for their behavior as it relates to your faith. So if you're going to hold him to that standard that we should support him, you should also drill down a little bit and speak about what behaviors are worth supporting, which you did. But when you take leadership, then your yay must be your yay and your nay must be your nay. Trump is not consistent in that. He is making a mockery of religion by your request. By your request, he's making a mockery. And it is not true to our faith as Christians to not acknowledge that God said what God said. And God had a lot to say about people being blasphemous.
Hey, strong thoughts. Again, definitely wanted to bring it up. I definitely, again, y'all are educating me on the political angle and the use of it. Thank you, Emil, for that. Again, that's why we do this show. Again, I think Brad said easy troll bait. People fell for it. It sounds like, Brad's right based on listening to both of you guys. All right, I'm going to play this next cut. Give me 1 second. Let me take Brad. Give me a second to take Brad's comment down so I can do some other ones. Thank y'all for the comments. Keep them coming. I'm going to try to show some more of them as we go, but I do need to get to another cut here. So give me a second, y'all. Producing live on air, y'all. Thank y'all for being with me. Here we go. Let me jump back down to our cuts. Give me a second to do that. So I'm almost there. All right. So now I wanted to go to our brother Shelly Winters, who's often on the show with us. We've been missing him for the last couple of weeks. He wasn't able to make it this week. And so I think what you just spoke to before you got into the religious part of what you just ended with, Leo, I think this is some of what you were speaking to. So everybody watching, this is almost a 4-minute cut, a little longer than what we normally use, but there's a lot of context that I want Leo and Emil to respond to. Leo, I'll let you actually, Emil, I'll let you respond to what Shelly has to say first, but he's talking about what's happening with the president and the coalition. I actually have a question I wish I could ask Shelly directly based on this, but I'll say that and then I'll let you go, Emil.
Catholics. He split Catholics with Biden and then beat Harris by 12 with Catholics. These are the demographic groups. It's by and large, it was called one of the once in a generation. I'm quoting here. This is what everyone agreed upon. Everyone agreed upon what I'm about to say. A once in a generation coalition. A once in a generation coalition. That's what the MAGA movement, that's what Donald Trump built. And I said back then, this coalition is not a Republican coalition, it's a Trump coalition. That's what I said. I've been saying that for the longest. I've been warning Republicans. It's not a Republican coalition. Even after Trump won, on the night we did our election coverage right down there in the live lounge, and then we went around the room at the end, will we hear tonight? I said, yes, we will hear tonight. We will hear by 1 o'clock in the morning, and it will be a landslide. I said that, and it was. And ever since then, I've been warning Republicans and the Republican Party, understand this, you have work to do to take this coalition and make it yours. You can't ride on Trump's coattails. You have to make this coalition yours, which means that you have to do the things policy-wise at the federal level and also the state level to make this coalition yours. The big, beautiful bill dropped. You lost some people there because you increased spending and didn't cut the deficit. So many libertarians started to bail with the big, beautiful bill. Because of that, you could talk about the tax cuts, you could talk about no tax on tips, all of that stuff, but libertarians were focused on the deficit and spending. And it increased both in a big, beautiful bill. Then you started to lose Hispanics, particularly men, when you started off by saying, I'm going to deport criminal, illegal gangbangers, violent criminals. And then you started deporting everybody. Then 2 Americans were shot. Hispanics gone, just like that. There's reporting coming out of Texas now where close to 2,000 farms in Texas have closed down because they don't have workers. Remember, we told you, we don't know if these are jobs people will do. I don't see a lot of white guys running out to Texas to farm. So you lost Hispanics with immigration. Not Hispanics were for deporting violent criminal, illegal immigrants. They weren't for deporting abuelas who have been here for 20 years and raised a family. But you all said, no, they're illegal. So you lost Hispanics. You lost black men with all the other stuff going on. The DEI stuff and the way you talk about it. You lost them. They're gone. Never to come back because they weren't Republican voters. They were Trump voters. This coalition that was built from the ground up, a once-in-a-generation coalition, is now gone within a year and a half. Destroyed. Because the Republican Party is too afraid to stand up and say, we've got to do something for the American people. And those who do say it, the Masseys, the MTGs, the Megyn Kellys, the Tucker Carlsons, the Shelley Winters, those who do say it, you're shouted down. You're a turncoat, you're a traitor. But the coalition's gone. And the only people left are boomers, and that's it. That's it. White boomers are the only people left.
So that's our brother Shelley Winters on his show, the Shelley Winters Show. Give him props. Again, hopefully we'll get him back maybe next week. But he said a lot talking about specifically, this is a cut just from last week on the show. So he said a lot. Let me say this real quick, and I want to get your response to Shelley. And so, I wish I could play more of the cut, but I didn't want to take too much time on our show. But he just kind of highlights that he's been saying this to the Republican Party, and as a listener of his show here in Atlanta, he has for, even in the beginning, like even as a big fan, like he actually opened that actual quote, the actual cut. I didn't get to play it because again, I didn't want to make it too long, but he says, you basically could have called this the Shelley Winters for Trump show or something like that. He said or whatever, because for years, for his time on the radio, he's been a big supporter, and he even highlights that he was told by the president himself that he helped build the coalition with the stuff he was doing with his show. So just kind of giving that context for this one part that in as much as Shelley's been saying what he's talking about on there, he always kind of says to the people and to other Republicans, and I'm like, doesn't Trump himself kind of tear up the coalition by his actions? That's what it seems like Shelley never speaks to, that Trump himself makes it hard for the MTGs and people like himself to kind of say, he's saying to the Republicans, stand up to Trump, but he doesn't make that easy. That's kind of the big point I'm trying to make. But go ahead, Emil.
Yeah, so I would debate, Shelley, that he built that coalition. I think that coalition was more of a default coalition, and this is my political analysis. It was more of a rejection of Democratic politics than it was an embrace of Trump politics, and the alternative was Trump himself. He denied Project 2025. As soon as he comes in office, he starts implementing Project 2025. That was a huge 180 for a lot of people, because they were like, hey, this thing doesn't look really good. And he said, oh, I got nothing to do with it. And then he hires the staff that wrote it to run his administration. So you have this problem that he doesn't really understand, that Shelley's pointing out. Shelley's pointing out that he does have the coalition. I disagree with how that he built it purposefully, in the sense that he shepherded all those people into his tent. But I do agree that once he had it, he could have done a lot differently to maintain it. And he chose not to. Instead, he chose to implement Project 2025 lockstep, which means that a lot of the things that were in there that people were running from, that he said, I'm not part of that, he actually spit on his supporters by embracing it the way he did, right? If he says, I'm not part of that before in the campaign, and then after that implements it almost lockstep, then you have a major problem with his supporters who said, I thought you said X, but now you're doing Y. The other thing that I think Shelley points out really brilliantly is that point for point, he's able to show how there are things that people thought they wanted that he didn't hear, hasn't heard. They've pushed back. They've called him out. They've said, hey, you're our president. We voted for you. Why are you doing things the way you're doing them? And yet the answer was to double down. It wasn't to backpedal or rethink a position. It was to simply double down. The only thing that he can say, is like, he's treating some cities differently than others. Democratically run cities are treated differently than Republican run cities, not necessarily because they have this dissimilar problems, but because of who's their leader. And those things really begin to add up when you start to look at them over the last 16 months. So there's a lot happening from that coalition standpoint, and he's lost Hispanics as a majority. He's lost the few black voters that he got, because he was up to 15, 17% black voters and up to 20% of black men voters. He's lost a lot of that support. He's losing a lot of support from his evangelical base. He's losing a lot of support from the people that were built up, because he has not fulfilled the promises that he kept, and he's not listened to the feedback his people are giving him.
Leo, I'll throw it over to you. And I, just from my limited perspective, again, you guys are the experts here. But I feel like, to a degree, during his first presidency, I recall watching a lot of his supporters feel like he, in a sense, met some of the promises that he said he would keep. Into this second term, into the second term, I feel like I've always heard that he was going to do exactly what he's doing now. Like, and when I say I heard it, I'm aware of in a sense, the promises that are made, but I don't know if I ever believed it wouldn't be what I see now. And I don't know if that's a correct assessment by me, but I'm interested in what you think of what what I'm seeing now is kind of what I expected to play out based on what I've been seeing. How does that look to you, Leo, as far as these things that that he's losing the coalition? How does that play out from your perspective?
Let me go back to sort of when Trump won the Republican primary unexpectedly, okay? And then once he won and people were concerned about who he was, right? In other words, Trump won something that very few people in America thought was possible. I even called him a comedian. I was on National Public Radio, and I said that Republicans are not that irrational. What I did not understand is that Republicans, and not just Republicans, but the Trump voter, I didn't know the Trump voter as well as I should have as a political strategist. And the Trump voter basically being someone who felt that there was an existential threat to their very existence, that had a grievance modality, that they felt as mainly white men and women, that, you know, the browning of America was a threat to them. All those things became secret reasons why people wanted to vote for Trump, and we were all surprised by that, you know, quiet majority that put Trump into office and then gave him power. Then once he was in power, the people around him would say things like, as let Trump be Trump. Why were they saying that? They were saying let Trump be Trump because they had to defend Trump against all the people who was like, this guy is morally inappropriate. This guy, you know, so in other words, these people existed who were traditional conservatives, who were principles-based conservatives, not entertainment-based conservatives. And in that first administration, many of them worked in and around the White House. In the second administration, he cleared them out as right at the end of his term, right? Mm-hmm. And then when Biden went into office and did a horrible job, I'm just saying that as conservative, but that's the way he took advantage of being able to take basically a weak leader like Biden and drum up even more angst so that he could get another shot at it. Trump just used a different strategy that was more gaslighting, more cultural war, more appealing to white fears. That's what he did. And using religion and religious organizations in that way was part of it. Okay. So when we talk about coalition, he's just very strategic. He really is. And I know a lot of progressives and Democrats don't like hearing people say that, but the guy is. He's smart. He's strategic. And so just his first term practice was different than his second term practice. There is no doubt. And that's why he lost people like me. Right. So there's a lot of Republicans like me, conservatives like me, who do not like a lot of what Trump has done. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Trump is not going to run again. Okay, I know a lot of people like to entertain that idea, like he likes to trigger y'all. And with that is those people who like to be triggered by that. He's not going to run again. But the question is, we've got the midterms coming up, and then we're in 28, we're going to have another election. Are Republicans ready to pivot from Trump? Can they? You know, Martin Luther King said the average something to the effect of, you know, one of the challenges of Americans is that our average attention span is 2 weeks and we forget, you know. So, yes, politics can reshape itself all the time. But I've been talking to people from Christian Coalition, Faith and Freedom Organization, Georgia Baptist Convention. I've been talking to a lot of conservative religious leaders, asking them, how are we going to pivot post-Trump? Because when we said, let Trump be Trump, we were saying, let Trump be Trump and not let the Republican leader be the Republican leader. So it's right. The Republican Party stopped existing because of the cult, you know, sort of mentality around Trump, because he tapped into some fears and grievances of a large number of people, including Black and brown people who went over and voted for him for some reasons that were not purely economic or education, okay? Which is how I led the minority voter engagement for Trump and for any Republicans, based on religious freedom, educational opportunity, and economic opportunity zones, et cetera, et cetera. He abandoned much of that language to appear to white fears in this second. And you can see it not by, you can easily see it by looking at personnel. So the first personnel, more rational people, more people with regular experience in political governance. Second administration, Stephen Miller, a bunch of really crazy people.
No, Leo.
Stephen was around, but he did not have the power.
Merit-based people.
No, of course they are, right? Yeah, the Pete heads. So we can clearly see what's going on. I don't see how Republicans really, that is the work now. Republicans have to figure out, how do we reinvent ourselves and make ourselves seem sane again? That's going to be really tough. Democrats are in a great position moving into the midterms, but Democrats tend to figure out how to mess things up.
Leo said it right there. I'm just going to jump in real quick, because Leo's hitting a point that I think is really important, and that is that People are beginning to see the Republican Party fracture and disintegrate in the way that it once was presented, and the Democrats have not offered a clear alternative to it.
Nope.
And because they're not strategically positioning themselves as a for party, that is, we are for these things, and whether they go pro-labor or be more progressive and pro-free healthcare, they need to be very clear about what they are for. What they've done is they've positioned themselves as the anti-Trump party, which will get you through the midterms, and then you're done, because he'll be not only a lame duck, but a lame duck without a Congress, which means that his effect will be completely cultural. It'll be completely symbolic in that respect, because he won't get a lot of legislation passed like he did in this 2 years. Okay. What does that mean for the Democrats? Montoya, Leo, it means they're about to fumble. Watch.
We'll see if you're right. Matter of fact, we got a couple of comments, and I'm gonna go to another cut that I thought was that I definitely wanted to have you guys give your perspective on. But one comment says, Bryant, you're right. So somebody agrees with you. Shah does. And then they got Brad, who says, what do Dems offer? Trump bad, America sucks, important millions of foreigners, men can be women, apologize to terrorists and cartels, empower China and other communist sympathy. No thanks. That's what Brad says. All right. Here's something I found. I want to give this guy credit. It goes by, make sure I get his name right. Let me see here. I want to give him his props for having him on the show. Let me see. He goes by Oh That Rich on IG. He talks about, this is something that seems like he developed himself. So I'm very curious in how you guys see this thing he calls the Americans Foundation Act.
Why I'm calling it the American Foundations Act. First, here's what I want you to imagine. It's 2029, and the Democrats took the House and the Senate in 2026, and then they took a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and the White House in 2028. Now, here's what the average person doesn't understand. And this is the reason why people think that Congress doesn't work anymore. This is why they think that the government is broken. The last time the left had this much power for a single term of Congress, just 2 years, was the 89th Congress in 1965, with Lyndon Johnson as president. He was a Democrat. The 89th Congress is widely considered to be the single most productive session in American history. In just 2 years, Democrats used their power to pass the Voting Rights Act. They passed a law that created both Medicare and Medicaid in one bill. They passed a revised version of the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Air Act. They established motor vehicle safety standards. They ratified the 25th Amendment. They created the federal student loan system. They created the National Endowment for the Arts, the Public Broadcasting Act, the Freedom of Information Act, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Over 60 landmark pieces of legislation in one single 24-month period. The America we know today would not exist if it weren't for the 89th Congress. And these laws were so popular with Americans that Democrats kept their filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and a massive majority in the House into the 90th Congress, even as the Vietnam War was starting to turn south. The fact is, the reason Americans overwhelmingly believe that government can't get anything done is for one simple reason. We can't stop electing Republicans to government. They hate government, so they get in, they do it poorly, and then they say, see, we told you government was bad. So let's vote every single one of them out and give the left what it needs to start fixing things. So where does the American Foundations Act begin? Domestically. Now, first, obviously on the economy. Since the end of World War II, American workers have gotten dramatically more productive. The economy has grown, corporate profits have grown, the stock market has grown. Everything grew, and for about 30 years, wage growth kept up. And then at the start of the Reagan presidency, the working class economy broke. From 1979 to 2019, the productivity of the average worker grew almost 4 times faster than their wages. If over that 40-year period, the salary of the average worker just tracked with productivity, the average worker would be making $9 more per hour than they are today. Not entry-level workers and minimum wage, the average worker, every worker, an $18,000 a year raise. Now, this is the infuriating part, because that money was still made. It just didn't stay with the people who generated it. The wealth flowed upstairs, while the workers fell through the floor. The American Foundations Act would fix the floor, raise the minimum wage to match the productivity to wage ratio from 1980, and then tie the minimum wage to inflation. So every single year it automatically adjusts. And Congress never has to fight about it again. Next, federal paid family leave for all full-time workers, starting with 3 months and then rising every couple couple of years to 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months, so businesses can have time to prepare. Because it's the right thing to do, and because we're the only developed nation that doesn't offer it. And that shit's embarrassing. Next, a federal ban on right-to-work laws. Because really the only thing they do is give you a right to get fired without recourse. And next, and this is something that I came up with entirely on my own, a corporate tax structure that charges progressively higher tax rates based on the ratio of the CEO paid to the average worker, steep enough to make it financially illogical to pay corporate CEOs things like golden parachutes or billion-dollar compensation packages while their ordinary workers struggle. If the right says, oh no, we're going to lose all of our CEOs, let them leave, because we can grow our own. And ours? They'll have their head on straight. Next, housing. Buying a house used to be something that you did in your 20s. Today, the typical first-time home buyer is in their mid-30s, pushing into their 40s. And the share of people who have even bought their first home has been cut in half since 2007. And according to the National Association of Realtors, delaying the purchase of a home by even 10 years costs the average family $150,000 in wealth they will never build. That's not a housing statistic, that's a wealth statistic. That's a retirement statistic. And lastly, on housing, a ban on corporate landlords. This one's not even radical. Tim Scott, a Republican, and Elizabeth Warren just got this passed through the Senate overwhelmingly. This law could open up a massive supply of single-family units, which is why I would also add a $25,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit, with $20,000 paid up front to help with the down payment, and another $5,000 after a year if you're still in the home. The next part of the act, elections. The United States has 50 different election systems. The laws on early voting, on mail-in voting, on ballot drop-box locations, when and how votes are counted, varies across virtually every state. And that inconsistency not only breeds confusion for voters, it breeds conspiracies for election deniers. The American Foundations Act would standardize this. A mandatory minimum 4 weeks on early voting, federal requirement to allow mail-in ballots, a tax incentive for people who vote, a federal holiday on election day, and free public transportation for anyone.
So Leo, we'll start with you. We had the show, we had you on when it was Who Does Better with the Economy, Democrats or Republican, very good show. I still think all the stats lean towards the Democrats actually handled the economy better, despite the voting and the polling shows that people think the Republicans do. So I'll say that. But it was interesting to hear this guy seems to be well thought out act. Obviously he's just laying it out on. So he has another 5 minutes of things that he laid out. But obviously I couldn't do a 9-minute cut here. And so with that said, Leo, your thoughts, anything that seems like propaganda to you, or what do you hear as the Republican on this show, if you will, or the conservative, I should say, on this show?
I mean, it's mostly propaganda, but the point is that it's propaganda, but there's truth in it as well. That's the beauty of propaganda. The best propaganda has some truth in it. Okay. Because a same progressive Democrat type could go and make arguments that Abraham Lincoln was the most significant presidential period of leadership. And he's talking about, really, I think, when you win an election, there are consequences. And one of those consequences is the ability to direct policy. So for me, he's begging the question, because under the Biden administrations, the Democrats had that same sort of power and authority that they had in 1964. And
almost. They didn't have a supermajority in the Senate, though, Leo.
They didn't. They didn't, right? So the point is that elections have consequences. And it wasn't the process of creating that legislation in the 60s wasn't, it's kind of naive. And there wasn't a 2-year process. Do we remember all the protests and turmoil and everything that went on? There was a movement of the people that raised consciousness, right? That's why I call that period the second Reconstruction. America has not, what Democrats and Republicans are battling about is what will be the elements and what will be the impetus of the third Reconstruction. So I'm not so partisan to not allow progress to happen, even if it's outside of my party affiliation. In 1964, many Jimmy Carter types, etc., existed as Democrats, right? But Jimmy Carter today would be probably rejected as a too conservative person coming out of the state of Georgia, okay, in a lot of ways. So the point is that we make a mistake when we get back into this, it's all about partisanship and who had control when. So I don't like really those arguments, because I think you can make strong arguments on both sides all the time. The bigger question is, what kind of movement are we creating that demands policy about the people that inspires, improves, invests in the people. And he did a wonderful job explaining lots of legislation that was about investing into the American people. And that's the movement we need now. The biggest movement that we have towards that is happening on the Republican side. It's a fake investment. It's faking into a cultural identity is the investment movement that has happened. You know, white men have been discriminated against and left out, and they've created a grievance movement. So the Republicans are doing that right now. That is leading to legislation and policy. He just doesn't like it, the guy who you just played, because he's not that kind of guy. He doesn't want that kind of leadership. But it is happening now. Democrats, as you said earlier, Emil, Democrats need to ask themselves what kind of leadership created the environment for that supermajority. And it came out of the people. So Democrats need to get better at figuring out, just like I do with the advocacy groups. I sit here, and at this time of year right now, legislative session in Georgia just ended. So now the question is, how do we do? What did we do well? What did we do wrong? Who are our allies? Who could we have done better in building partnerships with? What is the singular focus? What is that leverage issue that we feel like we can get a win with? What are they? And then how do we take the momentum of winning one thing and then start to use that momentum to win in other things that we also think are important? Okay? Democrats are not using that kind of strategy.
No, Leo, they're not. And this is the problem. For both sides in this environment, it's become an all or none. And if you go back probably 10 to 15 years, I'd say before the Obama era, because of the way Mitch McConnell framed the resistance to President Obama at the time, you know, we're going to make him a one-term president. But if you go back prior to that, there was a lot of bipartisanship. It wasn't because there was a lot of bad or good ill will. It was because there was a lot of places where people said, I will take a little bit of this to get a lot of that. Now it's all or none. Everything is about, if I don't get all of what I want, you will get none of what you want. I win, you lose. And that is, you're frustrating. One of the best speakers of the House was Tip O'Neill. And if you understand anything about Tip O'Neill, he was a consummate deal maker. He figured out how to get things done. One of the best majority leaders in the Senate was Bob Dole. Again, somebody who understood how to make deals work. I'll give a little, you get a little, we both win, the nation wins. Where I think the commentator was right, I listen to him too sometimes in my feed, where he was right was the gap between productivity and income is so significant, we really have to address that through legislation. It was during the Reagan era that gap started, and it's only gotten wider since. The American worker is more productive than they've ever been. They should be compensated accordingly, and they're not. And because of the very conscious union busting by mostly Republican, but not exclusively, you see the unions and the labor movement have less collective power to change that gap. Without that collective power, to Leo's point, they're going to have to galvanize a grassroots movement that changes how Congress legislates in order to close that gap. Because at one point, labor was strong enough to keep that gap closed. But as the labor unions began to bust, as labor unions began to receive the pain of right to work legislation and all the things that different politicians have done in states and in the federal government to break that union power, they have not had the ability to leverage on behalf of the American people power.
Emil, I want to get an understanding of it because you and I don't disagree. Why don't they have sort of like mastermind strategists, whether they are some billionaire person who is progressive? I mean, I don't really understand why they don't have someone that, Republicans have always, and conservatives oftentimes have someone who is a central leader, maybe because conservatives are more allowing of autocracy and that conservatives are willing to give power to a single person and say, tell us what to do. What is it about Democrats that they can't create a coordinated movement on some strong issues? Why? I don't get it.
To me, this is where the oligarchy has been very, very successful, Leo. Prior to the 1960s and really I would even push it into the late 70s where Reagan began to show a lot of headway. I would really look at the oligarchy as a fundamental force that shaped how the Democrats move. The Republicans by that era, in my opinion, were very clearly in the pocket of big business. They had shown themselves to be lockstep in that way. The Democrats had not. But then Reagan began to galvanize a different sort of look. Even during his campaign, I would say that's when the oligarchy started hedging bets and really pushing money toward both parties. And the Democrats got addicted to that. I can tell you from my opinion, as I look back at history, the 70s were really tumultuous for the Democrats for one main reason. They resisted the Vietnam War and had no plan afterward. Wait a second. They resisted something and then had no plan afterward? Yeah, history is about to rhyme in that way. And that's something that I think we really have to look at for the Democratic Party, is to say, where do we want the source of our funding to come from? Are we willing to accept oligarchy money? Are we willing to accept big corporate money? Are we going to really fancy Wall Street as we have for the past 30 years? Or are we willing to accept that we'll lose a giant chunk of that money in order to galvanize the people? Once they make that decision, and right now I don't see Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer making those decisions on behalf of the party, I think that they can turn a corner. But until then, I think you're going to see a Democratic Party that's going to always be middling, trying to play both a little bit of labor and a little bit of corporate, and therefore, as the word says, Jesus would say, "You are lukewarm, I spit you out."
Good stuff. We're already in our extra innings. I did have one more cut. If y'all have time to respond, if not, I can let y'all go. Okay, you both got time? All right, cool. This is from Joshua Doss, another one of our favorite. Well, I'll say one of the cuts. One of the guys I love to follow. He's a data analyst, amongst other things. He actually was on Stephen A. show recently, so big props to him for kind of getting himself up. But this is kind of directed to get back at our community. If you think about what we did with the 2 day. With the 2 days that we had here in Atlanta, I feel like some of what he says in here is something that we have to listen to if we're going to, one, not only elevate the conscience of those who are watching, but even challenges us, Leo and Emil, for how we think about moving forward as a collective in the African American community. So I love some of the things he brought up. I guess he was invited to something kind of like a Black policy talk. And so this is just a small cut for what he had
to speak about what is required of emerging leaders around narrative framing to build, quote, political power. I'm fascinated by this concept of political power and Black people's decades-long search for it. There's deity in it. Sometimes it reminds me of our search for God. The research I've conducted over the years has been centered around listening to and understanding the very nuanced opinions of the Black voters we need to persuade and the Black non-voters that we need to ignite. I'm here to relay a message on their behalf, and I want to be as clear as possible. As far as these voters are concerned, there is no such thing as political power, only power. As far as these voters are concerned, there is no such thing as political power, just power. What does that mean? That means that no matter how hard you try, you cannot offer them this thing called political power. You can't help them build it. You can't convince them to want it, because in their worldviews, it simply does not exist. What's more, if you try to offer them political power, you'll lose them. In their worldviews, political outcomes are not a consequence of political power. Rather, political power is a consequence of power. And are they so wrong? As far as this emerging group of Black voters are concerned, our quest for political power starts on the yellow brick road. And for 130 years, we've been off to see the wizard. As far as these voters are concerned, political power may as well be Richard Pryor in a room alone with a microphone. If you cannot understand the appeal in this worldview of Black Americans and many other Americans, if you can't see why the very people you intend to mobilize have made a companion of cynicism, then you have not even begun to reckon with the immediacy of relief, the depth of betrayal, the titanic scores of economic pain, and the boom-bust cycle of hope our communities have been going through. However bad you think it is, I am here to tell you it is far, far worse. So then, what shall we do? We at Hit Strategies is the research firm I work for, we have some ideas.
I love that last thought from Joshua Dobbs. And it's recognizing, and from my perspective, it's recognizing more so than we want to realize how deep embedded that cynicism when it comes to politics for, which is never going to equate for someone like yourself, Emil, or for someone like like yourself, Leo, who are very involved because y'all understand the power of politics. But I think it is worthy of understanding and respecting what I feel like Joshua offers is the psychology for why people blow it off. As much as we disagree with it, as much as we tell people you gotta be, politics gets into you. You know what I mean? As much as I love that quote, we have to, in my opinion, be fully considerate of everything that he talked about if we're ever going to galvanize the type of participation that will lead to the ultimate results that we would like to see in the places that we are aggregated. Those are my thoughts on that. Leo, your thoughts? Again, we're at the end of the game here, so just any thoughts to what Joshua had to say. I don't know if I have an answer for it, but it is something we have to think about. Go ahead, Leo.
So one of the things that I find inspirational about moments where we see Black thought leadership, Black intellectualism at a very, very high level. And I thank you for sharing that clip because I want to go and I spoke at Harvard Kennedy Center not too long ago, okay, in a classroom for a friend, not like as a featured speaker or some friend says, hey, come talk about your work. And so I went and talked about my work while my son was visiting the school. And that's where I have hope. That the brain trust exists. It's sparse. It's a sparse brain trust. And that's why I was sharing what I was saying about Memphis and about entertainers and athletes. That guy's not an entertainer or an athlete.
Right.
He's put metal, grit, effort since he was probably 3-4 years old into developing a critically thinking mind and being able to know how to do research. He's a researcher.
Right.
So I would be a hypocrite if I keep saying that Black people don't have enough think tanks, policy leaders, if I didn't applaud that and then therefore figure out how do I edify that. And so I'm excited. I'm inspired. Now here's the challenge as well, is that with all he's saying, and I'm going to hear Emil say more about this, the ability to transcend just Black politics or talk about politics, because I also say that politics is the competition for resources, power being the tool for getting those resources. So he's spot on. But Black people are so caught up in the identity of Blackness. It is a marketed commodity. That badge of Blackness is so important to Black people that I wonder, Emil, if we can transcend to understanding power over Blackness.
Let me say this real quick before you go, Emil, just to kind of plug Re-Education of the Negro. So I will say, hey, the book that I wrote, Re-Education of the Negro, I should pull it off the shelf here, is a transition to what Leo is talking about. It's just a challenge to understand that what Leo just spoke about is where we need to head. It's almost a response to one of our comments. Let me say this real quick. And this is just, Brad says, why is it always the collective is a Black vote? Why not Americans? This is why you lose people like me. And Brad also appreciated your comment. He said, thank you, which he was responding to you, Leo. And it's not that I'm trying to respond specifically to Brad, but again, we challenge ourselves like that. So I wanted to say, welcome to comment. Thank you for the comment, Brad. What I will say, again, the why, Leo, the why is a great question. Why is that the case? And do we need to still do that? I would say, no, we don't need to still do that. However, what I will say to Brad from this perspective is there has been a historical experience that is the reason for it. Not that I need to explain it, not that I'm trying to answer to Brad. I am just saying this to Brad to say there is a historical experience for why it is embedded as deeply as Joshua talked about. And so it's not whether you understand it or not, but the reality is if there's too many with a like experience, from my perspective, there's not enough Americans that understand that for it to be simply an American experience. But where we need to elevate to is exactly what Leo spoke about, in my opinion. Your thoughts, Emil?
So one of the challenges that I think Josh Doss brings up is that there are so many Americans, black, poor, white, who feel left out of the American dream, the American process, and they feel it's futile to even try to participate. So they just go about their daily lives. And one of the biggest issues is that they're the ones who, if I was to sit down with them and really have those one-on-one conversations, which I have in some very informal ways, we find out that there are some really good ideas brewing in those minds. And this is where someone like Joshua Doss can really help us extract those ideas by doing his deep research. But there's another part to all of this, and that is that the American experience is not universal. Mass incarceration affects Black people most. That is historically proven. It's a historical fact. A lot of people say, well, just don't be a criminal, except that we know that there was a problem in how policing was done, that was also historically, racially over policed. We were historically over policed due to our race. So
still are over police,
still are over police. So there's
as much as people highlight, 13%, leads in murder. We also are 86% of the exonerations that happen in the legal system as well. Go ahead.
There's systemic issues that need to be addressed in order for people to begin to see that. So they need to see a couple of things. It's kind of a chicken and egg. I'm going to be the one that says, here's the chicken. This is where we start. If we want to bring those voters, those non-voters in, especially those Black non-voters who could actually be a quite powerful block if they wanted to be, it is to show them the fruit of a little bit of their ideas and a little bit of their frustration being legislated in policy. They're going to have to see that. We're going to have to give them some wins to bring them in. It's not enough for us to ask them to join. It's not enough for us to just acknowledge that political power is just power. It's not even enough for us to acknowledge that they feel like it's futile to play. If they see some of their concerns turning into actual policies that they can see the result of, that will transform them. Hey, even though you didn't vote, here's some things I know you're concerned about, and the result of that concern is this policy, which affects your day-to-day life. Boom, you're beginning to win them over. Do that consistently for 2 or 3 Congresses, you'll get them at the federal level. At the state level, look at Zohran Mamdani in New York. What is he doing? First 100 days of his administration, he's filling potholes. They filled over 100,000 potholes in New York City in 100 days. That's a tangible benefit to the people they can see right outside their door. That's galvanizing people who otherwise would either not pay attention or not believe that their vote matters. And if he continues to do that, even when he makes a mistake, even when it gets frustrating, if they can see that he's trying and he's putting in the effort and that the effort is paying off in things that they can see every day, he's going to win over a lot more non-voters to become voters, and he's going to be the one that they vote for over time. So that it can be done, but it's a methodical process. It requires real action and real impact, and mostly it requires that you communicate the effect of policy down to those people who think that nothing they think or say matters, because it does. And people like Joshua Doss are pulling that data out, and it needs to turn into policy that those people get feedback from and say, see, even though you didn't vote, it mattered. Your thoughts matter, and we're addressing those issues.
And first, you have to get power before you can implement policy. And we talk all the time about how all the major cities in America are run by Black people or Black aligned people, as some people would argue, Boston, New York. So then you have the seats of power. Now it's just a matter of implementing strategy. So, as a conservative who has been a Republican strategist, I really don't have a lot of empathy, Emil and Montoya, when people whine about the lack of Black progress in Black cities, right? Because I feel like, you got the power now. You just got to show the grit so what you're pointing out about Mondavi is that he might be black aligned, but he doesn't have a black identity. So therefore he's willing to step outside of, voting rights and, police brutality. So his first administrative leadership wasn't to fight against the police. All the stuff that he talked about in his campaign to get black people to vote for him, what does he go do? He goes and does the potholes and says, I'm going to build grocery stores. Food and the ability to move around the city. He'll get to the other stuff later. But like you said, he's getting wins that transcend race.
Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of black politicians, and I've said this before on this show, and I'll say it again, we can't use the template from the 60s anymore.
Thank you, brother.
Wars have been fought, mostly won. And yes, we need to protect those gains, but we don't protect those gains by going back to those wars and refighting them. We protect those gains by using them as the foundation and saying it's a given that we're going to vote. So now the question is, are you wanting our vote to do this thing, or are you wanting our vote to do this thing? Because the vote's here. And when we start mounting campaigns that sort of entrench those wins over time, they're given. It's not a contest anymore. The Voting Rights Act was passed 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Let's stop talking about it and start using it to get to the next step.
Hey, great way to end the show. Thank y'all for holding it down when I got knocked off on the internet and got back. So great way to end the show. I'll remind everyone in reference specifically to what y'all talked about, because I just looked at these numbers, but there's 150 million people that voted, right? 77 for Trump, and like maybe 70, 75, almost 76 for Kamala, right? I'm talking about in the entire thing. There was 89 million who did not vote. So y'all are speaking to that 89 million. So great way to a great show today. Thank y'all for y'all time and the extra innings, which went over a lot longer. But thank y'all for the extra time today. We'll pop up on y'all next week. Please, I always forget to say this. Make sure y'all are subscribing to the show and sharing this show. I didn't get to promote this one, so definitely, if y'all saw anything worthy of what we're doing here, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Share it with your friends. See y'all next week.
Take care, guys.